So, with Demon Slayer Season 3 finally coming to a close a few weeks ago, I just wanted to make a video giving my overall thoughts on the series, as it seems like this season has been the most polarizing, especially regarding the discourse online that I've seen. For me, I kind of sit in the middle. I know some people are saying it's the greatest season yet, others are saying it's definitely the worst. I definitely would say I agree it's the weakest, but I don't think it's awful or anything. I think it's just quite mediocre, mid, if you will. One of the main reasons for this is that I just feel like this season felt different in many ways. But first off, like the title says, we got to get into this. The animation just felt oddly worse, and not in the sense that the animation was bad, just very restrained. It never felt like we got an in-your-face, oh my goodness, this is incredible moment, similar to something like Tanjiro versus Rui, or the final fight from Season 2. It really just felt like a downgrade, and considering how good Season 2 was, it felt quite odd that the animation just was almost worse than Season 1, I would say. Now again, that's not to say it was bad, but it did feel quite restrained, and the overusage of CGI was quite shocking, considering in Season 2 we had all of Daki's ribbons being animated 2D, whereas now we have CGI fish and CGI Hydra demons. It was just very odd and quite jarring to see in something like Demon Slayer. And look, I'm not trying to say that CGI is awful and can never be used well, and I don't think the CGI was terrible, but for a show that has such a high bar of animation, it is quite shocking, and for me at least, I wasn't able to get as immersed as I have been in previous seasons, and when that happens, then the story really needs to carry much more. I don't think Demon Slayer is a show that's carried by animation, but like the title says, I mean, if the budget is not there in terms of animation, then the story really has to hold itself up, and it really felt that this season also was a lot worse, quite honestly. Just the story felt very dull at points, and very different than what we are used to with Demon Slayer. And the fact is that one of the main reasons is that it is very different. This season really missed Zenitsu and Inosuke. They clearly are the heart and soul of the series along with Tanjiro, but it's their dynamic as the three of them that really pulls this show along. And so having just Tanjiro on his own, it kind of made me realize he is quite a dull character to follow. He's not super interesting because he doesn't have a really great personality other than just being a morally good guy who is trying to save his sister, but he acts better as the straight man to Zenitsu and Inosuke's more boisterous and all over the place personalities, and so not having them there really lacked this season, I felt. Obviously Nezuko's good, but I think that they really are two of the most important pillars in the story of Demon Slayer. Now, I will say that there are two Hashira, so of course the Hashira have always been good, right? So it should be no different than if we have two, they can sort of pick up the weight. But unfortunately, at least for me, I felt that the Hashira this season were just not up to the bar that has been set. Uzui, Rengoku are two incredible characters, especially Rengoku. They have such great personalities and motivations and well fleshed out characters. But the Hashira this season, man, at least in my opinion, felt very stale, very cliche and uninteresting. Their backstories felt very clunky and generic, but also hard to believe at the same time. First, let's talk about Muichiro. For me, he is just dull. I think I've just gotten tired of this apathetic character archetype that anime loves using, but him specifically, it just felt so generic, at least to me, the way it was done. The stuff with his brother and his backstory felt very just cliche, but also unbelievable, because why would you just hate your dad because he was trying to save your mother, and then after that you decide to never speak to your brother again? But all along, of course, he loved him, right? That just to me is just, it's a really stupid thing, and I just personally am not a fan of that type of writing. And so for me, he just had a very cliche arc, wasn't very interesting, he doesn't have the personality to back up not being as fleshed out in the way that other Hashira have in the past. And Mitsuri, I mean, she was barely in the show, so I don't want to hate on her that much, but like, she had not really anything, and I felt like her backstory at the same time also was pretty generic, and I didn't really feel much empathy for her. It just felt like, oh, a woman needs to get married. Let's just do this because it's Edo Japan, and that's just sort of a character archetype that we have now. But I mean, neither of them, it really felt like, were fleshed out characters with clear-cut goals, motivations that made sense to their identity and really pulled along the story. And so for me, they didn't really add much, and I was quite disappointed in their characters. Moving on, I also think that, and I think most people would agree with this, you might disagree with the Hashira take, but I think we can agree the antagonists this season were by far the weakest. There was a significant drop-off, it felt like, not only in personality, backstory, motivation, I guess, like, it just felt like they were very easy to defeat. They never felt imposing. I never was worried, which is shocking because I feel like Demon Slayer has had really great villains who feel like they really could just easily beat the main characters, and the main characters really have a challenge ahead of themselves with characters like Akaza and Rui, as well as the twins from Season 2. They felt like they were a challenge, a real challenge to beat, but with this season, having two of them be defeated fairly easily within 11, I guess 13 episodes if you count the movie beginning, it just felt strange how easy it was to defeat them, and they were just really, I don't know, uninteresting to me. Their powers were quite boring. They're quite annoying, like the one guy who just cries and runs around. That felt very tedious, like not a very interesting fight, just quite boring. Then, I mean, the other guy, he just traps Muichiro in his little blue encasing, and then Muichiro has his whole backstory and then defeats him easily. It really just did not feel like a challenge, which Demon Slayer, I feel like, has done such a good job with that. And so, at the same time, maybe that's why also the animation just didn't have a chance to go crazy, because the fights this season were just not very entertaining. They just felt very lackluster in terms of the choreography, the writing of the abilities and stuff. So for me, that was a big downgrade this season. And then the last thing I'll talk about, and I've seen a lot of people really liking this, and for me, this was unforgivable, and that is the fake out death of Nezuko, and then her getting the plot armor of, actually, the sun is not going to affect her, she can survive it. That to me was ridiculous, and honestly really brought the season down, because the whole journey has been Tanjiro fighting to save Nezuko. That's the journey we're following him on. And honestly, I was going to be really impressed if Demon Slayer managed to kill her off, and it felt like they were really committing that. Like, they played it out for so long. They had him running in slow motion, screaming after her, and then for her to basically sacrifice herself would have been a great moment of, now Tanjiro's in this for a different reason. He's in this for maybe revenge a little bit, but also he's in there for the bigger purpose of defeating the demons, and not just something for himself. Which I don't think it's a selfish goal to save Nezuko, but I think it would been a really interesting character moment for him, and a really interesting thing for a series to do. And I would have been praising it for that. I thought it would be a really daring choice, but of course, the fake out death, the plot armor, to me it's just so contrived. There was no foreshadowing to this. There was no really valid explanation. I liked the little bit of stuff we got with Muzan, but I wish they had done that earlier. At least this would have not come as such a shock. And the way they played it up, I mean, honestly, it felt like 30 seconds of them just like crying about her dying, and then she comes back. It felt really underwhelming to me, and so I really didn't like that. But yeah, those are most of my thoughts. I felt like this season was not, again, it wasn't bad. It's not a bad season. I think it would be about a 6 out of 10 for me. It's fine, but it didn't feel like it met the standard that Demon Slayer has usually set. And I'm excited for next season, hoping that it improves. Hopefully we get Inosuke and Zenitsu back, because I feel like they were really dearly missed. And I hope we get some more interesting Hashira, some more interesting antagonists, which I think we will. And I hope this Nezuko stuff gets a little bit more interesting. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the season. Do you agree with me or not? What did you think on the Nezuko fake out death? And yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Like the video if you want to support the channel, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.